Hello, I'm Dr. Ian McCullough with Johns Hopkins University. In this lecture, I want to go over some of the common challenges that students have in learning any program language, and Python is no different. So learning programming can be challenging for students that have no prior programming experience for several reasons. And these difficulties stem from the unique nature of programming, which introduces new ways of thinking and problem solving. And so I'm just going to go through several common reasons. The first is abstract thinking and logic. And the problem here is that programming requires a significant amount of abstract thinking and logical reasoning. Beginners often struggle with understanding how to translate real-world problems into a structured sequence of step-by-step instructions that a computer can follow. And many students aren't used to this type of thinking, and it involves breaking tasks into very, very specific, very granular steps. And I'm going to show you a little video that kind of illustrates this point a little bit later. So students might know what they want to do in general, but they have trouble breaking it into specific operations like loops, conditionals that are necessary to achieve it. And that problem is not really solved with ChatGPT or a generative AI solution. It really requires some, I think, more layman's examples of how to just think of common tasks, not necessarily programming tasks, but common tasks, and how you can break those into very simple instructions. And maybe there's some games you can play with friends or kids to kind of illustrate this type of thinking a little more effectively. The second one is syntax and semantics. So the problem here is that each programming language has its own syntax. That's the rules for how the code must be written. And semantics, like what does the code mean? So a small mistake in syntax, such as a missing semicolon or an incorrect indentation, can cause the program to fail or behave unexpectedly. Now, Python is a little more forgiving than a lot of languages. But a student unfamiliar with formal languages, or if you're dealing with like rigid syntax, such as like a missing parenthesis or an incorrect variable, it can lead to frustration. And the error messages generated by these compilers are cryptic and very difficult to even interpret. Now, one of the things that is a huge advantage with generative AI and ChatGPT is you can take your error message or your code and you can put it into ChatGPT and say, what's wrong with my code? Or what does this error message mean? And it allows you to, without memorizing a lot of these different potential errors, it allows you to kind of dialogue with, a troubleshooting assistant, so to speak. And I think it can help overcome a lot of these issues that people have or frustrations they have with syntax and semantics. Similarly, debugging and error handling. Beginners often find it difficult to understand what the meaning of the error messages are, how to fix the mistakes they encounter. And so finding and fixing errors in code, it requires patience, it requires analytic thinking, it requires experience. But you can benefit from you can benefit a great deal from ChatGPT's experience, right? And the examples that it has learned. And so a student might not be able to distinguish between a syntax error like a typo or a logical error. So a typo is like, hey, I omitted a key character or something. And a logical error, which is, hey, there's a mistake in the code's logic that produces incorrect results, but it doesn't necessarily cause the program to crash and give you an overt message. So, debugging can often feel overwhelming when it's not clear what the root cause is. But we're going to cover techniques for how you can help debug your code with ChatGPT, and I think you'll find that that's a lot easier than traditional programming has been. The next one is algorithmic thinking. Learning to think like an algorithm, like a step-by-step procedure to solve problems, is unfamiliar for most people. And programming requires the ability to design, test, and then iterate and redo that. So especially with concepts such as recursion, loops, or conditionals, they require a lot of understanding of flow control. And you're saying, hey, what is a recursion? What is a loop? What is a conditional? Well, a conditional is simply if this, then that. A loop is, hey, I'm going to keep going over and over and over again until I reach a certain condition. Recursion is iterating over and over until you maybe get to an answer you're looking for. And so understanding how a program moves through these types of steps, it can be very difficult for students to kind of grasp and understand. And so I think a key solution to this is going to be to write out flowcharts or to sketch out what you think is going on and be very visual about it. Another challenge is understanding computational concepts. So students need to grasp basic concepts like what is a variable? What is a data type? How is the memory managed on a computer? You only have so much space. Control structures like loops and conditionals. And without a strong foundation, these concepts, even writing simple programs, can be difficult. So what we're going to do in this course is we will have a mixture of hands-on using ChatGPT to code and some lecture from me where I'm going to try and explain these basic concepts in a way that you can make sense of. And then we can also look at how ChatGPT explains it in a very conversational way as well. The idea that a variable represents a piece of data in memory or that a loop iterates over a set of values is oftentimes hard to grasp for students, and it just takes practice. The next one is overcoming the magic perception. To beginners, the way a computer works can feel like magic. The connection between the written code and the machine's behavior is often unclear. And if you feel that way as you're going through this module, you're not alone. Without an understanding of the mechanics of how code translates an action on a computer, students can feel disconnected from what's happening. The concept that a single line of code can invoke a complex operation may not be intuitive, and you're going to struggle to realize computers follow very simple deterministic rules, but at incredibly fast speed. And so, interacting with ChatGPT and just getting in there and working on some basic practical problems, I think can help you overcome this feeling of magic. Especially as we kind of demystify the concept of programming and AI. Now, a huge one that will impact most people is the fear of failure. Programming requires a lot of trial and error, and students without experience, they fear making mistakes, especially if they've come from educational environments where correctness is valued over experimentation and playing around. There are a lot of people that like to pause and look at all the requirements and all the tasks and really kind of develop a detailed plan before they jump in and start executing. And no plan survives first contact with the code. So you're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. I've never seen anybody write a piece of code that just works flawlessly out the gate. And so, one of the advantages is with ChatGPT is you can code, and when there's a mistake, you can interact with your Gen AI troubleshooting assistant, and you can actually get help in overcoming some of these. But you have to be willing to lean in, do trial and error, make mistakes, and experiment, and that's just part of the process. So this leads right into the next point, which is a lot of students struggle because of a lack of immediate feedback or clarity. And most times when people are learning to code, students receive very minimal or confusing feedback from a computer. They're not necessarily having the benefit of a human looking over their shoulder and helping them with it. And so, unlike other subjects where feedback might be immediate and clear, error messages and logical bugs in programming can be very obscure. And so we can use ChatGPT to get some of that instant feedback. And this is a hugely powerful feature or advantage of ChatGPT that I think can help us improve in the way we code. Pacing and learning curve. The learning curve in programming can feel very steep. Like it can seem like you're almost too simple, and then all of a sudden it gets very, very difficult. Pacing is not unlike learning a foreign language. If I were to teach you, hello, how are you in a foreign language, and all we ever used was just this introductory conversational language, you're never going to learn language. You're never going to acquire an ability to be fluent in that language. But at the same time, if in the first day I start talking about, politics and religion and quantum physics in the foreign language, it's going to be so far over your head, you're not going to learn language either. So we need to hit this pace of perceptible input. And so what we're going to do is in this module and the next one, we are going to cover a lot of basic programming functionality and how to do basic programming in Python using ChatGPT to help us, right? So we learn how ChatGPT can be our partner in learning as we're going through this course. And then as we go into subsequent modules, we're going to introduce really challenging concepts, but at a place where you have enough of a foundation to be able to learn it. We're going to hit that perceptible input so you're challenged just enough to acquire the language skills, but not so much that it flies over your head. So that is going to require work and leaning in from you, but we've done a very intentional pacing and learning curve to go through this material. The next issue is the lack of immediate real-world application. Initially, problems and exercises in programming feels contrived, very simple. It's very difficult to connect these abstracts to anything you would need to do in the real world. And so I would ask you to, throughout this module, to just withhold judgment and just realize, hey, we're just making sure we understand how the programming language works and how it functions. But rest assured, we're going to get into more of those immediate real-world applications as the course goes. The next one is an overwhelming choice of tools and languages. So there's a variety of different programming languages, especially within a programming languages. There's different frameworks, there's different libraries, there's different code that other people have done to achieve some sort of function, whether it's plotting a piece of data or manipulating data in some way or accessing data from a website. You'll find that there are no shortage of solutions. There's a lot of options. And so it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the choices without a clear sense of where to start. Students oftentimes won't even understand the differences between languages like Python, Java, JavaScript, or why you would use one versus the other. There's also different, they call it IDEs, which are developer environments. There's different version control systems to make sure everybody's working on the same code. All of these things can be daunting. And so we're just going to make some choices for you. We've already chosen Python because it's most widely used for AI. And we're going to make a choice on the developer environment that everybody's going to use as well. And just know that when you get to a different organization or different application, people might make a different choice, and that's okay. They all behave somewhat similarly, and it just takes a little familiarity, kind of like I think when you're looking at your online streaming platform, the interface for Netflix is a little bit different than Amazon Prime, is a little different than HBO Max, but it's not so different that you can't figure it out. The last challenge that I'd like to discuss is a lack of strong foundational math skills. Now, not all programming requires advanced math, but many programming tasks involve mathematical concepts such as like algebra, logic, geometry, and students without a solid grasp of these basics might struggle in certain areas of programming. For example, you might be trying to write a program to calculate a complex formula. So that complex formula involves imaginary numbers. Well, you might not have an issue with the programming, but if you don't know what an imaginary number is or how you work with that type of math, that might actually be the challenge or the problem. So I'm excited to join my virtual colleague, ChatGPT, in this exciting journey through Python programming. I'm Dr. Ian McCullough from Johns Hopkins University.